Mr. Crossley, good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We've got a quick outline of what we're going to cover. I'm going to touch on some key information about the project schedule, try to unpack a little bit why we're talking about a 3-year project, touch on how the project's funded. That becomes very relevant when we get into talking about what mitigation measures we can implement and how we pay for those. And I'm going to hand it off to Matt to talk about some of the trail alternatives that we were directed to explore and other transit alternatives that have been put on the table. And then finally, we'll close out with some other business support wraparound options. Okay, so starting with some important things about the project schedule. There's a number of factors and considerations that sort of go into how the contractor and the city came together to come up with the schedule that we're operating off of. The most notable is that we have some longstanding permit restrictions on when we can do certain activities in the water. Those are mostly designed around protection of marine life, specifically steelhead is one of the key species of concern. And so multiple permitting agencies all sort of overlap with their permitting language, and those come together to represent sort of the biggest challenge we have on a schedule front. And some of the photos, they're all very recent. They speak to what we're doing right now, which is work in the water. We're pile driving, and so that is really step one for kind of the major construction on this project is building up below water to the water surface and up to the bridge deck. Project sequencing, I just spoke to that. You can't start building a house from the roof down. You have to start from the foundation up. And so we're doing the same thing on this bridge retrofit. Maybe not a visible but really big piece of this project is relocating a sanitary force main that serves the entire county regional sanitation district. Roughly 5 million gallons per day flow through that pipeline. Part of our retrofit project is in conflict with that line, and so providing a new home for that pipe is an important part of the sequencing discussion. And then finally, we did, believe it or not, try to design this project to maintain one-way traffic to the maximum extent possible. The trade-off to that is that it does really restrict the contractor's working area. So you'll see in some of the photos, there's really no flat surfaces for them to work off of, and that's because they're using every possible square inch of the bridge deck as it's closed. Okay, and then finally, environmental work stoppages are another piece of the schedule puzzle. We had to make some assumptions around how many hours per month we were going to be shut down because there are, as part of those permits, really strong and stringent requirements that if an otter or other marine mammal comes within a certain distance from the project, you have to stop all work. So that's baked into our project schedule. And then finally, there's many other stakeholders involved in this project. Nathan mentioned the Port District. They're a key partner. They have over $2 million worth of their own work that they're running in parallel to ours. And so they've been able to move their piece of the puzzle along successfully. And so that doesn't represent a schedule challenge at the moment, but it is another sort of variable that we have to plan around. This is the really simple version of the project schedule. The actual schedule is 18 pages long, and we're at the front end of the project, as you can see, through probably month 3 of the first and longest shutdown. I just want to make it clear that there are 2 long full closures. We're in the middle of the first one, and there's a second one planned for next year, after which we're talking about 1 to 5 day closures to finish up like resurfacing of the bridge deck and other really pretty minor things. But this speaks to sort of the sequence that you have to build. I mentioned pile driving. That's where we're at right now. So we're taking care of all the pile driving we can this summer in the water, and then we'll be moving to the land-based piles. There's quite a bit of that in the early phases of the project. Then next summer, the big main event is going to be relocation of that force main. With that said, we're hopefully going to be out of the water by the end of next summer, which is a really big milestone because you start to get away from having to work in certain seasonal windows, which is a key thing for our contractor to then have more flexibility to progress on the work. We've had some questions about Saturday work, so I just wanted to address that. First, I'll start by saying that we've worked 7 Saturdays on the job so far, which may not sound like a lot, but the contractors only had full control of the bridge since roughly July. Prior to that, PG&E was in the process of relocating all of their overhead utilities, so that was a major thing that had to happen before our contractor could even fully take control of the project and start doing their piece of the project. We've worked over 52,000 hours, roughly. There's about 40 people per day on average on the site, and One of the earlier photos was taken at dawn. We've had 3 days just in the last week where we started at 4 to 5 a.m. to time the work with the tides. So we're trying to maximize every opportunity that we can to make this project move along at as quick a pace as possible. We're going to shift over to funding if there's no questions on schedule. This is straight out of our budget documents. We're currently projecting that the total project cost is somewhere in the vicinity of $70 million. We have a local match that's covered 100% by gas tax, which is at about 11% of the total project cost. But with that, external funding from the state and federal government comes a lot of strings. So all of the work that we're doing is according to their federalized procurement guidelines. We had to go through our contractor had to go through a very rigorous disadvantaged business outreach process as part of the bidding process, which again gets at some of the sort of extra steps that we have to take when we're involving this type of money in our work. We've already gone through our first Caltrans level pre-audit on the project 3 months in, so they do regular sort of health checks on how you're doing with all your project filing. But again, it speaks to sort of the level of oversight and control that this project has with the funding. And we've already approached Caltrans and FHWA about some of the things that are on the table for discussion today and whether those would be eligible through the approved funding for the project. And specifically, a temporary trail was determined to be something that was not eligible. So we would have to look at other sources of funding, and we can talk about that at a later point in the presentation. So all that said, yeah, we have, although it's a very large and expensive project, we have very little discretion because there are lots of rules and restrictions on how both gas tax and federal and state money are spent. So I'm going to hand it off to Matt to talk about some of the trail alternatives.
Mr. Starkey, good afternoon, sir, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Matt Starkey, Transportation Manager. I'm going to talk more about some of the options that we were directed to look at. First here is the temporary trail. I was excited to hear that the community is really interested in adding this idea here. We looked at the project from Seabright to 7th Avenue, and we considered that length because we need to be careful at how we made accessible connections to this trail. So while we have a relatively small work zone, how we would connect to that trail is actually quite long at 3,000 feet there. There are some challenges with this corridor, which we're aware of as we are working on the rail trail project through this segment right now. Crossing on the bridge requires particular designs around fencing and railing to make that safe. And then also as you approach 7th Avenue, the tracks are much below the roadway grade there. So any sort of connections there require accessible elements. We also knew that we would need to work with our partners at RTC to get agreement on the tracks being out of service. While we don't see train service on this today, it is considered an active rail line. So we looked at 4 different options here. A pedestrian path, what we're calling the intermediate trail, a trail with just decking, and the interim trail, which was studied as a part of rail trail. The pedestrian path we looked at was 4 feet wide, which fits within the existing rails. At that width, though, we wouldn't be able to accommodate bicyclists very well. So we also looked at what we're calling the intermediate trail, which is an 8-foot wide trail placed on top of the existing tracks. That would avoid doing any sort of significant drainage work. And at that width, we can accommodate bikes more easily on the section. We also looked at a wider option, which would be building a deck on top of the railroad tracks. This would allow us to provide the widest path possible to make it easier to use without impacting drainage or the tracks themselves. And then we went back into our project files to look at the interim trail that had been studied as a part of rail trail. That was a very generous wide path at 16 feet. It actually fully removed the tracks, but did have some drainage implications with that wide section. With these 4 options, we found that prices could range anywhere from $650,000 up to $7.4 million. We based those on work that we've done in the city to date, and we also received a price from the contractor on the project for the intermediate trail, so that a $900,000 to $1.2 million price tag, depending on if we pave the top or not, is a number that we feel really good about. We've also received some emails about other members of the public doing their own cost estimating, and we feel that those numbers sort of fall in line with what we're seeing on the unpaved number there as well. So I think all in, if we were looking at the intermediate trail, with removal, that could be up to $1.7 million in need to do an item like that. To pull off the trail, a key thing would be to think about funding. Kevin mentioned some of the challenges with the project. We would need to get some direction today if we're to move forward with the trail to identify extra funding for the project. Luckily enough, there is currently a call for projects underway from the RTC, and there's $8 million available in what's called RSTPX funding. I bring that up because typically transportation funding requires the investments to be in place for 20 years. And so we'd be looking at doing some sort of demonstration or interim project. And so that particular funding source is very important if we're interested in going after it. With those sort of grant funding opportunities, there's always a local match that comes into play. In this source, it would be 12%. So if you had a $1.7 million project, we'd be looking at needing to find about $200,000 in local funding to complete that work. Beyond the funding, issues with doing the temporary trail alternative, there's still the sort of typical project constraints that we would need to work through. Environmental clearances, permits. We are working through seismic analysis on the Harbor Bridge right now through the rail trail that we would need to get results back in December on. We would need to complete a design and then, of course, ultimately negotiate using the rail line with RTC and Progressive Rail. We also looked at parking alternatives. This seems like a pretty easy one to implement. We recommended doing 2-hour parking in the lower Seabright area. Currently, we don't think that'd be a big impact to the revenue that we receive. It is important to remember, though, that we use meters to ensure that we have curb turnover in front of businesses. So we do recommend that we maintain a 2-hour parking overlay in that area. We would need to come back to City Council to sort of retroactively update the municipal code if we do receive that direction. We also looked at transit alternatives to increase usage in the area. 4 different ideas we looked at. First one being considering the TIG-M demonstration train that happened a while ago. We could further investigate that idea. There's certainly challenges with stations, how the train service would actually work. And so it would be a really challenging operation to pull off. We think one of the easier items to work on is to have us engage with Santa Cruz Metro on working on restoring the Route 3 into Seabright. Currently, that route has been detoured. Our understanding from them is that the additional travel time in the area makes it difficult to serve here. So we would consider adding, if we were to add transit service, work with them on what sort of capital improvements, perhaps dedicated transit lanes might be needed to ensure that operation. We also looked at the Santa Cruiser shuttle. We know from the work that our economic development colleagues doing that effort costs about $65,000 a month. We felt that with what you could operate with a single shuttle between different points in Seabright and downtown, that it likely wasn't worth the cost and effort to do that option. The one idea that we were in favor of is the Harbor Taxi is considering now to fund additional service on that. It's a low monthly cost, and we've heard good results from that shuttle's operation. The next item we looked at was how to consider using that single lane on the bridge to accommodate perhaps two-way traffic. For some context, there are 18,000 vehicles per day that cross Murray Street Bridge, 10,000 cross eastbound towards the harbor. So we do have a sort of directional priority going eastbound. In the afternoon peak period, it's even more eastbound traffic with 1,000 cars per hour in that peak hour going eastbound and only 600 cars going westbound. Since the bridge has been fully closed, I think it's been fair to say we've experienced additional traffic up on Soquel, which is impacting people's commutes and travel times that we would like to avoid in future operations here. That peak hour travel direction is why originally eastbound was proposed on the bridge, reduces the impact on Soquel, and then it also provides the emergency response vehicles that travel from the city to access the harbor area most quickly on their way to responding. So that's why we've had it as eastbound here. We looked at what two-way traffic through a single lane would look like. This is an application that's often used in more rural settings. We've probably experienced it on Highway 1, for example. They don't work as well in these longer segments that we see here, and they don't work as well when we have bicyclists and pedestrians in the more urban condition that we're working in here, as opposed to a more rural context like Highway 1. So considering that long distance, I just wanted to share some parameters we'd be working with two-way traffic in a single lane. So the work zone out there is about 1,000 feet long, which would take cyclists about 70 seconds to clear if we had a traffic signal there. That means that you'd wait at a red light for at least 70 seconds of opposing traffic coming at you, and then 70 seconds for that last car to enter the work zone and then clear. So you'd have about 140 seconds, 2.5 minutes of time where you would just wait at the signal while traffic is processing. And so I don't think with the two-way traffic, we'd see much benefit as far as travel times in the area. And that's one reason it hasn't been recommended in the past. The other challenges with this is how we would operate the temporary traffic signals. They can't be optimized for time of day. They operate very simply as opposed to our more complicated full signals that we have. So those considerations are why that we felt that adding that sort of complexity and risk wasn't really worth it in this project, and why we've continued with our recommendation of eastbound traffic here. And with that, I'll pass it off to Rebecca.
Ms. Unit, good afternoon. Welcome to the council meeting.
Good afternoon. Rebecca Unit, Economic Development Manager with the City of Santa Cruz. So I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of some of the community and business outreach that we've done on this project, both prior to the start and as we've continued through. So as Nathan mentioned, this project has been on the books for quite a while here, and council and various commissions have reviewed this, as well as the city's communications channels through press releases and our project website, project newsletters, a lot of communication in that form. As the project began, there was a community meeting, and we followed that up with a business meeting with the Seabright businesses to give them a little bit more detail into the project scope, hear feedback from them about what they would like to see in terms of support and various other requests and questions, much of which Matt has covered here as we've sort of gone through that feedback that we received. We've also done business walks, which is standard for a lot of our projects, to go out and meet in person and deliver project information, contact information to the businesses around the project site. And then we'd have ongoing email communication, meetings as needed, in-person outreach as needed, as well as project feedback surveys to get some insight from the businesses directly. From our initial conversations, there was an interest in doing business promotion and support. So we've had some ongoing promotional efforts that we've put together in terms of radio advertising on KAZU and KSQUID. We've done some Lookout Local promotion, promoted content article, as well as display ads that have gone out on their website, as well as in some of their newsletters. And so we've extended those through the summer period. We've also done some social media posts and advertisements, and we've worked through our economic development newsletter, the city's newsletters, as well as our partners that are in the business promotion space, looking at opportunities for other engagement with Visit Santa Cruz, Event Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz Chamber, Think Local First, those sorts. And then what we are currently working on, looking at increasing this, and sorry, there's a little bit of an overlap there. We're looking at some additional advertising opportunities in some regional media outlets, looking at additional radio advertising, updating some of that messaging as we look to extend the water taxi service and various other ways to encourage that visitation. And then also event programming is something that we've been looking at. We've had some engagement with a few different partners that are interested in potentially putting things on and looking at digging into that a little bit deeper. And then we've also entered into an agreement with Get Virtual, which is a business assistance service with some digital marketing and web presence. And then, of course, as economic development, we're available to meet one-on-one with businesses to help understand sort of what their particular needs are, interests are, and be able to connect them with resources and consulting services that might be available. And that's a little image of our display ad that's been running in Lookout there. We're also looking at increasing and improving the signage. So as part of sort of our initial approach, there was some construction signage that was put out there signifying businesses open, but we want to really elevate that and have some more positive messaging, encouraging the community and reminding them the importance of supporting our local businesses. So we've got some mock-ups here of some additional signage we're looking at installing, as well as potentially some yard signage that we could put in areas like Arana Gulch, or if neighbors or residents want to have those in their signs just as a sign of support there, something we're exploring. We've also heard from the businesses, an interest in some financial resources and support. And so we have looked at a couple different programs that we could provide. And the first of this is a potential business loan program. So looking at opportunities for low interest loans with city guarantees, up to $25,000 with the full city guarantee, a 4 to 6 year term, 4 to 5% interest rate, and there's potential for forgiveness there as well, up to $20,000. We would need to have some verification of that impact for that qualification for forgiveness. And then we would also allow loans up to $50,000, and the city would be guaranteeing a portion of that. We currently work with Grow America for our business lending programs, and so we already have that relationship in place, and we're looking at to bring this program together in September if we receive that direction and interest from businesses. The other approach that we're looking at is a grant program, and so this is something that we've looked at examples from San Francisco and City of LA, looking at providing up to $20,000 in grant funding to businesses. This would need to, again, be based on sort of that verification of financial impact. Our sales tax, where we do a lot of that verification, is delayed by several quarters, and so being able to get that sort of granular detail could make timing of this a little bit later on. We could also look at having some documentation with signed attestation to the need for that verification if we want to do this sooner. There would be a need for a funding source to be identified for this program, so the timing is TBD with that as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have partnered with Get Virtual, a business resource. We've used them during COVID times and all throughout. They've become a really great service for businesses to be able to meet one-on-one, get some audit of their web presence, their marketing, digital marketing, and get some training and services to be able to make improvements there or get things going if they haven't been doing it already. This is a value of about $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the different scope of services that businesses are looking at. So this is available now. We did do some outreach to businesses through a survey and got a lot of positive interest in this. So looking forward to rolling that out to businesses. One of the other things that we heard from businesses is the value of the temporary outdoor dining that they have on private property. So we know what a lifeline this has been since we first launched this program, and so we are supportive of extending that through July 1st, 2029 is the proposal we've put forward here, bringing that year after the bridge closure. The current permits are set by a temporary ordinance that expires July 1st, 2026. So we would need council's approval of an amendment to that ordinance. One thing I also am requesting direction on is whether we should extend this only to Seabright businesses or look at all of the businesses that currently have these permits in the city. So there are currently 21 businesses operating under temporary outdoor dining permits on private property, and 5 of those are in the Seabright area. As I mentioned, we conducted a survey just prior to this council meeting to get feedback on a number of the items that we've discussed today. And so just want to give a brief overview of sort of that level of support for the various actions. Strong support for the water taxi and increase to the creation of the Metro bus service. There was opposition to removing parking on Seabright to allow for that peak travel time bus lane. And then 58% requested get virtual services. There's good support for the additional signage and marketing promotions that we put together, as well as very strong support for event programming. Just to dive in a little bit deeper, we gave a few samples of event ideas to put out there, and we're definitely happy to talk with businesses more individually, or if people have ideas, feel free to send them my way. But we're looking at how we can support activating these events, either putting out a request for proposals to provide some funding for these events to occur, or doing a sponsorship if event producers would like to get some subsidy on their costs to put those on. And then just solidifying sort of project communications going forward. I will be serving as the business liaison to businesses on this, and Ashley is our community relations specialist on more of the larger project questions going forward. Hand it back to me.
Thank you, Ms. Unit. Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, thank you. In closing, we have a slide here just for the community if they want to continue to follow project updates with the Murray Street Bridge project. Again, at cityofsantacruz.com/MSB. And in addition to this, the team will be working on revising our webpage with some additional graphics to help explain the complexity of the project. So be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks. We'll be sure to share that update once it's done. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir, and thanks to each one of the folks who made presentations. Let me ask if there are questions or comments by council members.